The Echoes of Slavery, Part 3, The Papal Poisoning, Slicing the Cake and Reclaiming the Name. Welcome back to Delisa Unfiltered. I'm your host, Delisa, and before we dive into the deep water, today I'd like to take a second to acknowledge the heartbeat of this show, and that's you. If you're feeling the fire in these episodes, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. All those shares aren't just numbers. They are the pulse of this movement. We are 156 members strong now, and I have to tell you that I'm incredibly encouraged to know that 156 people out there want to hear what I'm talking about. I want to give a special shout out to my family here on this soil in the U.S., as well as my Jamaican family and my brothers and sisters in Nigeria and my family across the UK. We are connected by a thread that they tried to snap, but it's only getting stronger. I'm just a woman from the Midwest, Flint, Michigan, born and raised. I'm a Flint water crisis survivor, so I know what it feels like when the system decides that your life is a line item on a budget. I know what it feels like to be relabeled as a casualty while you're still breathing. But that survival is what gave me the eyes to see the medicine that we need today. We aren't just talking history, we are performing an exorcism on the architecture of the void. The Predator's Journal and the Identity Theft, 1492. Let's set the stage of the crime. Europe in 1492 was a pressure cooker of debt and plague. Enter Christopher Columbus, a desperate contractor with a quota. When his three floating monsters appeared on the horizon of the Guanahani, the Taino people didn't reach for their spears, they reached for gifts.
And his three floating ships appeared on the horizon of Guanahani. The Taino people didn't reach for spears.
They were so pure in their sovereignty that they actually swam out to the boats. They swam out to the ships. They brought parrots, bundles of cotton, and javelins to trade. But the truth is, the medicine. Columbus wasn't looking at hospitality. He was looking at their utility.
I do not see friends. I see strong arms and gold for the taking.
Him swim and saw strong arms. He saw gold jewelry in their ears and on their wrists. He saw commodity. He wrote in his journal, they should be good servants. With 50 men, they could all be subjected and made to do all that one wished. Before the sun had even set, on the first day, he had relabeled a free ancient people as Indians. Why? Because to call them Moors or sovereigns would acknowledge their treaties. He needed a label that made them subjects, so he could justify the theft. Let's go to the high-rise office of the 15th century Vatican. Imagine Pope Alexander VI. On May 4, 1493, he dips his quill in ink and issues the Papal Bull Intercatera. Family, he sat there and sliced up the earth like a birthday cake. He drew a line of imagery down the Atlantic and handed the slices to his friends in Spain and Portugal. He claimed divine authority to the gift land he had never seen and a people he had never met. This established the doctrine of discovery. It said that if a land was inhabited by Christians, it was terra nullius, nobody's land. To my Choctaw and Creek family, the label's forgotten. And to my Moors, who once held the keys to navigation, this was the paper genocide. By relabeling us as savages or Indians, the Pope's law made the land vacant. You were standing on your soil, but relabeling made you a squatter. They labeled the Moors to strip them of their science and relabeled the indigenous to strip them of their inheritance. The sacred counterattack and the spirit of the unconquered, the resistance. They want you to think we won freedom through benevolence, or that we were just liberated by the pens of white men. No, we won because our ancestors stepped out of their labels and back into their power. We've been steered away from our divine identity by fear, by religions that acted like armies. The moment that spirituality was discovered, I stand with the spirit of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who taught us that the greatest weapon of our oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. He told us to emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. That resistance isn't just a fight, it's an awakening. It's refusing to be a subject when you were born a sovereign. You don't have to give up your history to find your power. You just have to see that everything you've ever known is now fully embodied in the truth. Now let's go deep into the Yoruba essence. When the ships pulled away from the coast of West Africa, they thought that they were just carrying labor. They didn't realize that they were transporting Babalaos, lords of the elements, Ianifas. They tried to relabel as property, but you can't own a person who carries the Orisha in their DNA. They told you that your Shango was the frequency of lightning, justice, and the drum was a demon. They told you Oshun, the frequency of the sweet waters, love, and diplomacy was witchcraft. They told you Ogun, the spirit of iron, labor, and war, was a savage. The unfiltered truth, they didn't hate your religion. They were terrified of your technology. The Yoruba didn't just pray, they operated in Brazil. They became the Candomblé. In Cuba, they became Santeria. In Trinidad, the Shango Baptists, they used Catholic saints as masks, a spiritual camouflage. While the master thought they were bowing to a statue of a saint, they were actually vibrating on the frequency of an ancestor. Now that's how you keep the sacred fire burning when the law says you aren't even allowed to have a match. To my Yoruba family, you are the reason why we still know how to talk to the earth. You are the reason because you know that true wealth isn't a bank. It's in the Ashe, the power to make things happen. The Haitian fire. Of Boys Came In, 1791. At Boys Came In, our people didn't gather for a debate. Duddy Bookman and Cecil Fatiman led a voodoo ceremony under a storm. They didn't pray to the God of chains. They made a blood pact with the spirits of the land. They became an army of the divine, fueled by the sacred life force of the earth. That spiritual medicine is what crushed Napoleon's army, the greatest military force on the planet at that time, and burned the doctrine of discovery to ash. The Maroon Magic. Queen Nanny, the old science. In the Blue Mountains of Jamaica, Queen Nanny refused the very concept of a shackle. She was a master of the old science. She practiced obia, using the forest itself as a living weapon. She had her warriors dressed in the trash of the trees, standing so still that the British walked right into the jaws of the warriors. They say she caught bullets with her bare hands. She proved that when you are in alignment with the land will fight for you. The indigenous stand, the embers of legitimacy. To my Choctaw and Creek warriors, you know the land wasn't a gift from the Pope. While the system tried to relabel you, colored, Negro, African American, Indian, to steal your allotments, they carried the sacred fire. The elders carried them embers of their home fire in clay pots for hundreds of miles on the Trail of Tears. They weren't just carrying coals, they were carrying sovereignty. But the fire didn't stop there. Let's add some more medicine to the archives. The Prophets of War, Turner, 1831. Let's talk about Nat. The system tries to paint him as a madman. He was a prophet of the frequency. He didn't move because he was angry. He moved because he saw the signs in the heavens. He fasted and prayed until he heard the voice of the Spirit telling him the time of the serpent was over. They were so terrified of the spiritual authority he carried that after they killed him, they didn't just bury him, they butchered him. They tried to consume his power by eating him because they couldn't understand how a man they labeled a Negro could move with the wrath of God. They tried to turn him into a commodity, even in death, but they couldn't eat the spirit. Nat Turner proved that a single soul in alignment with the divine is a nightmare for an empire. The War of the Golden Stool. Queen Mother Ya Asawante. 1900, across the water of Ghana, the British showed up and demanded the Golden Stool, the sacred soul of the Ashanti people. The men were hesitating. Ya Asantawa stood up and told them, "If you, the men of Ashanti, will not go forward, then we will. I shall call upon my fellow women. We will fight the white men until the last of us falls." She led the army of thousands. She showed the world that our stools, our symbols of power, are not for sale. The Stono Rebellion, 1739. From Charleston, our people didn't just run, they marched. They carried banners that said liberty, and they moved to the beat of drums. Why did the colonizers band the drum immediately after? Because the drum is the heartbeat. It's the GPS of the spirit. It synchronizes the heartbeat of the people. It carries messages for miles. They fought it because they refused to be discovered. They knew that they were who they were before they hit the shore. The Seminole Defiance. For decades in Florida swamps, my indigenous brothers and the Maroon African created a mixed blood resistance that the U.S. Army couldn't touch.
They were architects of their own liberation.
Deep within the unforgiving marshes of the Dismal Swamp, self-emancipated Africans established independent societies.
Now, let's travel down to the Savannah River, 1786. There was a community there that had been thriving since the 1770s. Rule 1. Do not talk about Maroon Club. Only fight when you have to. Those other rules were doubled down on. These weren't just people hiding. These were veterans. They had weapons, military training, and zero intention of working for free.
Fall back! Retreat!
Hold your ground. Secure the marsh.
They weren't just runaways, they were the architects of their own liberation. Before outlandish meant eccentric, it meant unconquerable.
Yes, we lived in the swamps, in the outskirts, places they couldn't come safely with a boat or a horse. We stood our ground.
They used the old science of the Everglades to disappear into the water. They refused to be relabeled. They were the first special forces on this soil, proving that when the Moor and the indigenous unite, the architecture of the void crumbles. An ancestor-connected person is unconquerable because they know their real name. They know that Indian is a lie, Negro is a lie, minority, Black definitely is a lie. You are the fire. You are the old science, and you are the counterattack. The 20-pound reset of the 1970s, we're moving this way. When I look at 1970, we see the 20-pound reset. The world saw a people stripped of their wealth, left with a flat fee for their entire history. The predator didn't account for was the Igbo principle of unity. It's the Ikinga, the strength of the right arm, and the Umana, the collective breath of community. The resistance wasn't fought with guns. In those years, it was fought with spiritual economics. They came together in apprenticeship system, where those who had a little gave to those who had nothing. This wasn't just business, it was a sacred pact. They turned that 20 pounds into a seed, watered by a spiritual refusal to be erased. Across the ocean, in the midst of the mountains, that same Biafran spirit was vibrating. They practiced a unity that paper couldn't track, and a colonial ledgers couldn't name. They understood that as long as the heart beats, in rhythm with the ancestors. The reset is nothing but a lie on a piece of paper. They were and remain the unconquered. That was ritual poverty. It's the same 503-year-old eraser trying to wipe out your inheritance by changing the name on the file from Flint to Port Harcourt. They used the label to justify the theft. Reclaim your fire. To heal the echo, we have to reclaim the name. We are 156 members strong now, and we are waking up. We aren't the Indians or the coloreds they created. We are the sovereigns. Sovereignty is older than their laws. I am not an Indian. I am not colored. I am a Moor. I am. Invoke the protection of Nanny. I catch the bullets of the enemy and turn them into my power. I revoke every false label, every reclassification, and every paper genocide. The doctrine of discovery ends with me. I have found myself, and I am exactly where I belong. The paper can lie, but the blood remembers. You are Marcus Garvey once warned that while the body can be released by a key, the mind can only be released by the truth. He knew that the most enduring chains were not made of iron, but of mental slavery. The quiet acceptance of a name that isn't yours and a history that began in a hull, but the echo is changing. The frequency of our identity is shifting from a cry for help to a declaration of being, the sovereignty of self. When you reclaim your name, you're not simply changing a label, you're performing an act of sovereignty. You are declaring that your lineage predates the ledgers of the plantation. This is not a battle of religions or a contest of us versus them. It is the simple, quiet, and undeniable power of a person who has finally looked into the mirror and recognized the face of a king or a queen. When your mind is free, the world has no choice but to follow. When your spirit is free, you are no longer a guest in someone else's story. You are the author. Now, the great recognition today is a global nation of resilient people who is waking up to a series of truths that can no longer be hidden by a paper genocide or false classifications. We're recognizing our ancestry, that our roots reach deeper than 1619 and span across oceans and ancient civilizations. Our law, that true sovereignty is inherent, not granted by a government or a doctrine of discovery. Our spirit, that we are the fire that never goes out, protected by the legacy of those like Nanny of the Maroons who fought for the sanctity of the soul. Our unity, that we are one people, one nation, bound not by a struggle, but by a shared brilliance. To know who you are is to be found. To know where you come from is to be grounded. And to know where you are going is to be free. The echoes of slavery are fading, drowned out by the thunderous realization that we are exactly who we have always been, sovereign, more, and eternal. You are reclaimed. And I'm Delisa, and this has been Delisa Unfiltered. Peace.
As I walk through the valley of the shadow